And the whole world is searching for something, and the whole world is searching for, peace, for love. They're searching for something, what I mean, to fill that void, because we know that inside of a human being, there's a void. And only God can fill that void. So, many people fill it with different things, different aspects of life, different things in life that they think, are going to fill that void. Only to find out that only one thing really fills that void, and that's Christ. Hey, I'm Gene Costa, in the landscape business. I've been coming to Pentecostal Assembly since 1997. I am married. I have 2 children, 2 grandchildren. I'm 54 years old. I'm glad to be here. Well, as a child, I was born in the islands of Azores. Came to America at the age of about 6 years old.
What year was that?
That was 1969, January 1969 that we came. So, growing up, always, have been a Catholic. Obviously, parents were Catholic, went to Catholic church, came to the States, was basically brought up most of my life here, and continued to be a Catholic, for the better, well, half of my life, I should say, my younger life. So the upbringing was obviously traditional. My mother and father had been brought up as Catholic.
So they had the crucifix on the wall?
Yes,
and,
absolutely, yeah, crucifix on the wall. They had, the rosary, the saints,
So they had the picture of the Pope?
Yeah, and well,
And
I don't remember the picture of the Pope, but I do remember the picture of the saints. I do remember, the rosary. I remember a Bible that no one really ever read. It was just basically, sitting on top of the table, looking good, collecting dust. My mother would dust that, once a week or so, whatever the case may be, So in that we had, our tradition. We always had tradition, so there were certain things that you did do, certain things you couldn't do. As far as Lent-wise, couldn't eat meat. I remember as being a child that one of the things that was kind of scary was that when you went and when you took Christ, the portion of that bread, that you do in Catholic religion, you couldn't spit afterwards when you get out, because they taught you if you spit, you would spit out Christ. So that was one of the things. So it's like you'd run home, get home, drink a glass of water, or eat a piece of bread, then you were fine. You know what I mean? And just being a normal person, just obviously as that type of person, of course, there was many things that we normally do. We drink, we smoke, we cussed, we did all those things, That was just everyday life, normal, just, hey, my buddy next to me is doing it, I'm doing it, so is, 1,000 other people that are doing it. So to us, that was just, normal. The bigger things, murder and all the other stuff like that, I think those were the mortal sins, as they call them. The other sins weren't so bad. Those were the big sins, that, to get up to this. So basically, that was just a normal life, what we call normal, to do that. But in that normalcy, of going through life, there was always, like, I know I've said that, but there's always that void.
what was it? Was it a person or a situation that you finally said, that's it, I've had enough, I need to change, I want change? What was it for you that made you take that first step?
I know that later on in life, is when I got married, my son was born, and a little bit later on in life, some people had tried to tell me at work. I remember one man trying to tell me about Christ, in this way. And being a Catholic, says, hey, listen, I know about Christ. I'm a Catholic. I've grown up as a Catholic. I've been a Catholic all my life. I know about Christ. You can't tell me nothing I don't know. And so, in that respect, I think it was when this woman named Linda, she began to speak to my wife. She began to talk to her about Christ. She began to befriend her. And then she began to come over the house and she began to explain the Bible. She began to really explain the Bible and really what it meant. I mean, like I said, as being a Catholic, you got that from going to catechism, you got some explanation, you read other books associated with the Bible, but never really studied the Bible. Even in church, you got sermons, and that's basically what you got. You never got that in depth, really, who was. So she began to intrigue me. She began to pique my curiosity. Like I said, I had that void. So as she began to speak about Christ, as she began to teach us and begin to explain in the Word what it really meant in certain passages that I've always had curiosity about for years and years, she began to explain them to me, and it made sense to me. So she began to fill that void, and as she began to fill that void, I began to want in it more and more. And so as she began to teach us for a couple of years in our home, which we had a Bible study, and she led the Bible study, she began to, to hit home, and she began to hit those areas of my life which I was seeking for. And as soon as she began that, we got invited, like I said, we got invited to go to Zion, and Dr. Shambach was there, R.W. Shambach was there, and he had a big meeting. It was packed, the house was packed, the house was full. I believe the Holy Spirit was preparing the heart, getting my heart ready for that time, cultivating the heart with the curiosity that I had. And then as we went, then my heart was ready to accept. When he gave the message, when he gave the altar call, boom, I was right there. You know what I mean? And so I needed to fill that void. And so that's what I was looking for. And that filled the void, because as she began to explain to us, as she began to teach us the Word and what it really meant, and certain things that I had heard or as was taught as a boy really made sense now. That, certain things that you were taught to fear God as a God of, that had a lightning bolt ready to strike you if you did anything wrong. I began to see a different side of God. I began to see a different side of Him as not that God, of punishing, but the God of love, the God that loved. So as I began to see that, I began to experience that, there was a whole new life for me. So I was ready. My heart was ready. I was ready. As I began to fill that void, I was ready to move forward. So picking this church, why did I pick this church? Well, I think that we really don't pick anything in our life. I think that when we allow God to move in our life, I think He does the picking for us. I know that a lot of times we do pick stuff and we turn out to be wrong, but God, I think, has a purpose and a plan for every life. So if you're watching this video, then He has a plan and a purpose for your life right now. So in that, I think that going through what I was going through, my divorce, what I was going through, I had a Bible study used to be in my house. So that had to be canceled. And then after that, the pastor from this church began to take over the Bible study in my sister's house. So as he began to do that, I began to go to the Bible study, began to learn from him. And since he was a local church, and a church that was close by where I live, I began to come to the church. So as I began to come to the church, I began to like the church. I began to see that there really wasn't a big difference, or there wasn't really much difference at all from the church I had been in before to this church now. But one of the things that really stood out, I think, that kept me in this church was when I actually came back into the faith. I left for a little while, but I came back into the faith. Again, really seeking God, really, trying to do my best for that. I think one of the things that really hit home for me was as I began to get my feet back on the ground, being stable, kids were stable, divorce was over, as I began to be stable, I found one of the things was that I was going to go back to my old church. I was going to go back there because I knew everyone there. I knew the pastor and everyone that was there, and I liked the church. And so I thought about going back. I figured, let me go back, you know what I mean? I'm comfortable there, I know everyone there. I think I want to go back there. So one day when I was here, and the pastor of the church began to speak, he said something that I think captivated me, kept me, and that's I think what's kept me here, is that he said, without even knowing, because it was the Holy Spirit that led him to do that, without even knowing, he said, there's someone in this church that's thinking about leaving. He says, and after all, isn't it the same God that we serve? Whether you serve him here or serve him someplace else. So to me, that was a message for me. To me, that meant that the Lord wanted me to be here. This is where he wanted me to be. He had a plan and purpose for me here. That was my old life there. This is a new life here. So that's one of the things what really made me stay, was that, after he said that.
Okay. What advice would you give anyone to come here or to any church?
I think, like we touched on before, I think church is a very important part of a believer's life and a non-believer's life. Because I think that's where you commune together. That's where you have communion together, you know, and you come and you listen, and you come and you hear, and you come and you receive, you know, and you get filled, you know, with what God has for you for that week. I mean, maybe you're going through something that week, and you need someone to agree with you. You need someone to be there for you, to pray for you, someone that will reach out to you, you know what I mean, and feel what you're feeling, you know. And so I think communion with believers or communion with non-believers is very important, and I think that we need to come together.
You can have it all, Lord. Every part of my world. Take this life and breathe on this heart that is now yours. You can have it all, Lord. Every part of my world. Take this life and breathe on this heart that is now